Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Doctor Who, a great season premiere, giving us a great introduction to the 13th Doctor as well as her three companions. So I think it was like a really nice story all together, but just kind of breaking everything down. I immediately fresh off the regeneration. I'm wondering what happened to that because that's something that never really got answered. Like we see what happens when like the Doctor's regeneration kind of goes off. Like part of it just kind of swooped off and went off on its own. I was like, and that's going to turn to a storyline element later on, isn't it? I thought it was going to enter one of their bodies or something like that. Maybe it secretly did. I doubt it. Like the way it looked at, it's kind of like it just floated away. I'm sure that's happened before. Like the Doctor's regenerative energy passing like that. Like that's happened before, right? Like I said, it's been such a long time since I watched like any of the other seasons, so like a lot of like situations like this in particular kind of escape my mind. But it's like, maybe it just eventually dissipates. But I feel like that's not the case. That's probably going to be something later on. But I love that we literally pick up with the Doctor literally landing in the middle of this situation. That being it's so interesting because she's without a sonic screwdriver and out of TARDIS, and she's a little frazzled. It's kind of interesting because she tries to get a little sleep to, let the regeneration finish its transition. But I think like this ain't the first time that's really happened, right? I feel like I don't really remember it coming up too much for the other Doctors, but maybe I definitely know from like 9 to 10, like going from Eccleston to Tennant, it was because I remember like. That was a big point that he slept a lot of the episode because trying to recover from the regeneration. But I think some of the other Doctors like passed out for a little bit, but I don't know if they ever like were. I don't remember because I don't even remember like Capaldi 12, sleeping at all. Maybe he did. I just don't remember. I think he did, and I think it's just an aspect of the regeneration I legitimately just end up forgetting about. But she didn't have much rest, so she was kind of a little frazzled and just been like, oh, I hate having pockets and stuff like that. And it's like, why are you calling me ma'am? It's because you're a woman? I am? I mean, this is kind of new to me. I was just like previously like grayish white haired, Scotsman. So I was like, just the inside stuff. But at first, like that ball of electricity, the moment it zapped everyone, I was like, yo, what's up with that? What did that do? I was like, are they going to be connected or something? To a certain degree, they were. We're all connected by the fact is they all had DNA bombs inside of them. That was an interesting aspect. And I thought that was kind of interesting, like how it operates too. It's like it breaks down your DNA like that. It's just kind of like brutal way of handling things. Like I love what the story ended up being, basically because it's like, okay, so there's that blue thing. Then you had that whole dude Raul situation. It's like, he knows about this. Like, what is this? I thought he was someone else. Like I thought it was like, okay, he's an alien from a different world trying to take advantage of the situation. It's like, no, his sister Asha was taken by the similar situation like 7 years ago, and he was monitoring like the atmosphere changes to see if they ever resemble the same day that his sister disappeared, because he knows there was correlation between this. Was like, okay, that happened that day, that means that same thing's going to happen now, so I'm closer to finding my sister, which is kind of sad. He never got the chance. I mean, he ended up dying, but even that heartfelt message of being like, my sister's name is Asha, don't let this happen to somebody else, if I died, that was kind of like, man. I thought it was kind of interesting. I was like, oh wow, he's getting killed off and we don't even know what his thing is. It's like, oh, okay, so that's how we find out about it. But it's like the running theory was kind of like, okay, are these two like alien species that came to Earth to war with each other? And it's like, no, they're actually one and the same. He's from a species called Stenzar, the tentacle blue thing with the electricity and stuff. That thing is actually a information thing. It's meant to track. Actually, each tentacle is like one thing, but they're all kind of augmented to be like this super massive tracker. And it turns out this dude is a part of some competition to become the leader of his people. They're kind of like conquerors and stuff like that, but to become their leader, he has to go through a trial. Basically, they use Earth as their hunting ground. They have to hunt down a specific human. In this particular case, it was Carl. I thought like the moment it was like, oh, this thing was tracking Carl, I was like, oh my god, Carl is secretly an alien, because I was like, oh, Carl knew exactly what was going down the moment this happened, didn't he? Because the way I was like, oh, he's looking a little suspicious, acting a little fishy. He's like the only one that doesn't want to be part of this situation. In retrospect, it's also like, oh yeah, just because he didn't want to be caught up in all this weirdness and stuff like that. But I was like, oh, he knew it was coming after him specifically. It's like, no. It just turns out Carl's a regular human. He just happened to randomly chosen for this thing. Basically, he's the trophy. He has to come the alien dude Simshar. Which that whole thing about collecting teeth, I was like, oh, it's a trophy, which I was right. Not an extent. Like, the fact is that he puts him in his face and is like, ugh. I was like, okay, like, I was kind of right. Like, you're collecting trophies, but it's like, no, you're supposed to wear your trophies, which is just kind of like, oh, that sucks. Also, like, they kill people by freezing them because their skin is just naturally so cold that even a single touch from them is enough to freeze someone. Even Grace was talking about, like, Raul's, like, jaw was, like, cracked open from it just because his body was frozen so solid. But essentially, to win this competition, he just has to bring Carl down. You're not supposed to have any weapons or tools, which the doctor goes, you're cheating. That's why you're able to do what you're doing, because you're cheating, because you're not supposed to be able to do that. Like, using that device to help you is actually unfair. And that's also why she was like, because initially she was like, this thing was trying, like, gave them the DNA bombs because it was trying to get rid of any witnesses. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Because she did note that it didn't kill anybody. Like, the person that was driving the train, the conductor, like, ended up dying because it was just shock of just the whole situation. But it, like, that thing didn't explicitly kill her. Interestingly, it turns out, like, and then now at the end of it all, in retrospect, it's like, oh, it makes sense, because he wanted to kill anything that would have been a witness to what he was doing, because it would have also meant there were witnesses to the fact is that he was cheating, even though they didn't really comprehend everything. And I even love how he tried to patronize the doctor, being like, oh yeah, you figured it all out. Like, I'm sure your brain is burning from figuring it out. And she was basically like, did he just call me stupid? I even love the whole aspect of the doctor not even being able to remember her own name. She's like, he's like, who are you? And she's like, I'm glad you asked. And it's like, oh, dude, it was so close. It was like right there. Because even at one point, she's like, oh, the word is on the tip of my, and Ryan was like, tongue. She's like, yes, tongue. Oh, you're so smart. I also love, like, the irony behind the whole situation with Carl too, because I guess Carl kind of has self-esteem issues, so he's kind of like, oh no, I'm brave, I am special, I am wanted, you know, somebody out there wants me. It's like, all while, you know, someone is literally hunting him down. I also love the fact is that the doctor literally built her new screwdriver. That's the first time that's happened in this show, right? Because usually it's like the TARDIS presented the doctor a new screwdriver. In this case, the doctor doesn't have the TARDIS, so it kind of makes sense. But I think this is the first time that's happened. Well, not necessarily, because let's not forget the doctor, 12 made the screwdriver into shades at one point. So it's kind of like, not technically the first time. There might have been older examples, but I just don't remember. Once again, if you don't know, I've never seen the original series. Everything I know about Doctor Who is based on what I've seen from 9 on, essentially from the 2005 reboot / continuation on. I feel like I should always kind of add that stipulation everywhere. And also the explanation of, like, the regeneration. I always love that aspect of, like, when the doctor kind of explains that, because it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, you hit that moment where it's like you feel like you died and then you're born again. I was like, yeah, that's got to be a weird sensation, and the burning from, like, the light exploding through your body and stuff like that. It is something you don't really think about. I feel like not all the doctors even talk about it either. Like, obviously the weirdness of the regeneration and stuff, sure. I even, like, her, when she jumped across the crane, she was like, man, I could swear my legs were longer than this. What I also think is so fascinating about this situation and just bringing all these characters together is the connections. Like, I wasn't expecting that. Like, I feel like, I mean, for one, we never have, like, a big group of companions typically like this. It happens every once in a while, but doesn't happen, like this, you know, like 2 maybe, never really like 3, and for them to all be connected like that, like Ryan and Graham, that's his step grandson is what I guess you would call that, because Graham married his Ryan's grandmother Grace, and then Yasmin and Ryan knew each other from school, and I'm like, that's such an interesting thing that this group is all literally tied together like that. That's so fascinating. Because I didn't really watch too many of the trailers, so that connection like that never came up. So I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I thought it was just going to be like a random group of people. The fact is, I never saw Grace it didn't cross my mind to think that Grace was going to die. Like, I legitimately was kind of like, oh, she's probably most likely just going to stay behind or whatever, let them go on their adventures. But I was thinking, like, oh, it's kind of interesting considering the fact is Graham is going instead of her. And it's like, I was like, oh man, that sucks. You know, at the grand end of things. I even love her, like, having her moment of being like, is it wrong that I'm kind of enjoying this? And then Graham is like, yes! Because he was the one that was super like, okay, why is she chasing after the other alien? Okay, why are we following after the other alien? Also, like his like always as bus drivers. Bus drivers are always have the intel and stuff like that because he was like, oh yeah, because Kevin the bus driver gave them the information they needed. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. Also, Yaz being a cop is pretty neat too. Wasn't Amy the only other cop? It's kind of interesting because I don't think we ever really did too like that came up too much about her being a cop. Maybe it did, but because I almost let that slip my mind that she was one because you don't see her as a cop for so much time. It's only in like the first episode of season 5. I feel like they really point that out, but nevertheless. You know, I'm actually sitting here thinking about it. In the grand scheme of things, it's interesting too because Graham being there for Ryan. I think that there's many different layers to that. For one, it's like, well, Ryan lost his grandmother, so that's a hard thing. But also, he has to be there with the man that's not his biological grandfather. It's like, you're the dude that married my grandmother, so there's that complicated thing. It seemed like the family situation is already kind of messed up because even Ryan talked about the fact that he lost his mom 6 years ago. And then on top of all of that, now losing his grandmother, apparently his dad's never really been there in his life. Even the fact is that his dad didn't even show up at his mom's funeral. It seems like his dad has a tendency of like just not showing up. So, like I said, it's just kind of like, you know, Graham probably trying to be that father figure for him and maybe Ryan being a little resentful for him, like towards it because it's just like my grandma's gone. But I think maybe we won't even go through that because Graham said something at her funeral. It's kind of like, hey, I'm not even supposed to be here. She's the one that should be here. And so I guess maybe, you know, in Ryan's case, maybe he can see that she, like, you know, Graham is hurting just as much as he is. Maybe, I don't know. We'll kind of have to wait and see how like the dynamic shakes out in that regard. It's actually interesting too because it turns out, oh yeah, Graham was sick. He had cancer. He was going through chemo. That's actually how he met Grace because she was his chemo nurse. So he's been in remission for the past 3 years. So, like I said, these little plot points they're bringing in like that, I think is pretty interesting. Like I said, plus the overall fact is that they have the connection they do. Like, that never happens like that. Like I said, like, the last time that connection happened was, like, Amy and Rory. Like, having, like, companions, like, with a bond or a connection like that. Like, I think Amy and Rory were the last one. What I also thought was kind of amazing was, like, how the doctor handled the situation. Because he was about to set off the bombs and everything. I was like, oh, what? And it's like, oh, the moment she transferred all the DNA bombs into that tentacle thing, and the moment he absorbed all the information in it, he also absorbed the DNA bombs. I was like, oh man, or the transference to be specific. I thought that's kind of interesting. And she's like, okay, so now you literally have no choice. You've already set all those bombs. I literally gave you a chance to just walk away, but you wanted to try and kill us all, and now you're hurting yourself. So it's like, here's your thing. Leave our planet, which is interesting. Like, there's that moment, like, Carl kicks him off and the doctor kind of like tells him like, you shouldn't have done that, because I think it's like, because that could have led to him killing him, like him dying, not killing himself, but like rather that could have led to Carl killing him. And it's like, at least what the doctor did was kind of like a last ditch effort. Like, she gave him the choice and he suffered the ramifications of his choices, but like, hey, maybe he gets to teleport, he gets to his people in enough time, he'll be able to save himself. And I think maybe in her mind, it's like Carl doing that would have just been like, you would have killed him. Don't do that. Like, what I did was kind of a self-defense thing. You just outright doing that, it's like the battle has already won and you were trying to deal another blow, essentially. That's how I interpret it. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. But it's kind of, you know, sad that such, you know, sad circumstances kind of ended up bringing them together. But I guess in the same sense, there's a silver lining to it because, you know, Grace did a good thing because they're like, yeah, Grace dying the way she did was the way she would have done it anyway. That's how she lived her life, helping people, and that's how she died. It was helping people, trying to stop that thing. So, because the whole point the doctor's trying to make too is to make sure that because if they didn't stop it now, like eventually someone else in the future would have come back to make Earth its hunting ground. So who knows what's going to happen? Because I'm curious, because that dude Sam Shaw probably won't, you know, be found out for the cheater he was during his whole circumstances. But I'm curious to see whether that storyline ever come back around in the sense of his people coming back to Earth. Maybe what happens to him makes it so that it never happens again. Who knows? Because we do learn what happens to those who are kept as trophies, basically to put in cryo, and they're left in a state between life and death, meaning Raul's sister Asha is still somewhere on their planet. So, and then on top of all that, it seems like there are layers to this whole situation because this kind of all started with Ryan because he pressed those shapes in the air and that's what gave the A-OK for them to like it. So it seems like someone has to give you clearance to enter their world or at least kind of give the A-OK. But it's like, yeah, but there's like, no one would know that, you know? So I'm sure on some level Ryan blames himself a little bit because Graham kind of blamed him at one point and kind of look at you. You kind of started all this, which Grace is like, stop it, Graham. Which, you know, now that's probably added layer to all this that Graham blames himself because it's like, yeah, all this spiraled because I kind of set this all in motion. So that's probably something he's probably going to be dealing with maybe as the season progresses. We'll have to wait and see in that regard. But isn't this like the longest the Doctor's ever been separated from the TARDIS? And once again, I could be wrong. Like, I'm sure there's instances of the bit that not being the case, but still, it's just kind of, it's kind of crazy. It's like, oh yeah, you don't have the TARDIS at the beginning of your adventure. I also thought it was kind of interesting the family conversation. I'm like, do you have any family? She's like, no, they're long gone. I kind of carry them with me all the time. Like, the fact of the matter is, like, what was it, her exact words? That basically she copes with not having them by bringing them along with her. Like, basically that's her way of coping with it, that what they would have said, what they would have done is all kind of become a part of her. And I also like that conversation too, in a sense of like, and like what she was bringing up earlier when she was talking to Graham and Grace about her situation of like an echo of who she was while also getting a calling of who she is. I also like that speech that she had given where it's basically like we all have the potential to evolve while staying true to who we are, honoring who we've been and all that kind of helping us become who we need to be next. I thought that's kind of, obviously that's kind of like the little like nod to like, you know, the whole like passing of the torch of her being the next Doctor and everything. So I thought that was kind of a nice way to kind of phrase that. So what I also thought was kind of interesting too is the fact is that none of them outright wanted to go on an adventure, because typically that's the thing. I'm like, oh, let's go on an adventure. This is going to be great. This is going to be amazing. That's typically how it goes, but it's kind of like, yeah, honestly, we don't want to. It's like, hey, you got to find your TARDIS. Hey, you know, we're glad to help you try to do that in that certain regard, but it's kind of like, oh, we plan to go out there with you searching. It's like, oh, we help you with this device and everything you're going to use to teleport yourself to the TARDIS. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and they just happened to kind of sadly get dragged along with her in that regard. So I mean, maybe eventually their mind will change about that, but it's just kind of interesting, like right from the start they didn't like outright be like, oh yeah, we want to go on this adventure with you. And the episode ends with them literally stuck in space, no TARDIS inside, even though that's kind of where the TARDIS is supposed to be. So crazy circumstances. Like I said, overall, like a great like intro to our new cast of characters and just a crazy situation to kind of end an episode off on. I also really like the outfit. Like, I don't know if I've ever talked about that, but it just aesthetically I like it, because I'm pretty sure her jacket's also supposed to be a hoodie too, isn't it? Which I like hoods on jackets. I don't know why, I'm just weird like that. But just I like her clothes, her style, because also like she's the most, at least with this show, she's like the brightly colored like full Doctor. Like, I don't know, she has like her light, like her navy-ish blue t-shirt and just a gray hoodie and just like the kind of light blue pants. It's like there's a lot of pop and color to it. That's what I was talking about before when I was talking about some of the trailers. It was like, this show seems brighter, like contrast-wise, but maybe that's just me. Like I said, maybe that's just me being stupid. It just I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. Like I said, even aesthetically, like her outfit is different from typically other Doctors, because it's just kind of like, I don't know, like, I don't really know how to phrase it. I'm probably being, maybe I'm just being stupid. I don't know. I think maybe it's just because I'm thinking in comparison to Capaldi, who typically just wore black as a Doctor. So maybe that's why. Either way, I'm very excited to see how this season, which I should also be saying series, is going to play. I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.